Welcome. This will be the first lesson, and we're going to begin with real Shanghai Mathematics. We're beginning with year one, practice books. There's two for each year, and we're going to start with 1.1, and then once this is completed, we can move on to 1.2. This is also suitable for those who are in year two but struggling with year two material. They can start on 1.1. And as I've mentioned previously in the tips, it's better to make the work easier for your child, which will build up their confidence, and then they will enjoy mathematics better. In terms of the books themselves, they are relatively cheap. I bought this particular one from eBay for under £2 with delivery included, and there will be links below in terms of buying the books new if you'd like as well. There'll also be a link in the description with regards to the answers, and so do please check those out as well. The advantage of buying it quite cheap is that I would recommend that you allow your child to write in the book, as this will make it more enjoyable for them rather than writing in another book. Also, the practice book consists of 5 units, 1.1, and will aim to dedicate a whole video on just one unit. And hopefully, the video will not be too long. We will cover some of the material, and I've got some images, but clearly, you will need the book and to purchase the book to go through the material, as due to copyright, there will only be very limited information on there, and you definitely will not be able to follow the questions and do the questions just from this without purchasing the book. So if you haven't purchased the book, it may be a good idea to get the book first and then go through this material. So we begin with Unit 1, and it begins with sorting. So this is what it says on page 2. Let's sort. It refers to a pupil textbook, but you do not need to have that, and this is also part of real Shanghai Mathematics. It's more expensive, but I really do not feel that you need to get the textbook. As long as you go through the practice book, there should be plenty of material, and if there's any areas that you require more practice and I feel that your child may need more, I would mention it there. The first bit here is about sorting, and here, as you can see, question 1, sort the objects and discuss your reasons. And this is for your child to just sort the items, and pretty much if you look at the questions A, B, and C, they can be sorted out either in terms of size or in terms of color. And then question 2 is sort and circle, and there's options there. You can sort it either by color or by size. Both are fine. And then moving on to the next topic as such, it's number 2, and that's called Let's Count. And here it's about counting and matching the items according to counting. Clearly, your child should be able to count, should have that skill already in terms of being familiar with numbers, to be able to utilize these books, as it's year 1, and they should have already had some learning already in reception, which is before year 1. And so here again, you've got circling the item, and the example is also given, so it should be straightforward. And then you've got the sharpness here, and be able to count how many there are, and then again label that, and then count how many there here, and then label that, and count how many here, and then label that, and count how many here, and then again put a label to the right one. So there can be more than one right answers there. And then it goes further down to 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9, and 10 page over, and then it mentions about counting and circling, and the numbers next to them, which for example mentions 5, so you need to count for 5, and I put them in groups of 5. I already mentioned 6, the same thing. It's about counting and circling those amount of items within the pictures, and the same for 8, 9, and 10. It should be fairly straightforward. And then moving on to the next page would be page 6. This is a combination of counting and coloring the dots and then write the missing. Again, they often give you an example for the first one, so it should be fairly straightforward. So number 3 has been done in terms of 3 items, and there's 3 dots have been colored, and it's number 3. So the next item, there's 4 items there, so 4 of those circles need to be colored, and then the digit 4 should be written, and then the next one 2, and so on and so forth. And then moving on to question 2, which is on page 7. This will be counting and circling, and again the first one has been done, and should be straightforward. Sometimes there are more than one options to be able to do it. For example, number 5, the items are circled in a column method, but it could also be a row. So there are different ways sometimes to do it, but you can see from the examples. Again, it should be straightforward, with obviously some input from yourselves, especially if your child is struggling to read. But you should encourage them to try and do it themselves in pencil and have a rubber. If it's wrong, they can do it again. And then page 8, count and write the missing numbers in the boxes. Again, it should be straightforward. The first one has been done in terms of 7 sons, and then you just need to count the other items and go and do it. If they're struggling with the counting in terms of repeating it, it might be an idea of just crossing the item that you've counted along the way, so you know that it's been done or ticked along this way, so that you can make sure that you can be certain that the numbers have been counted if you're struggling or you're counting the same item again and again. And then moving on to number 2, count and write. Again, fairly straightforward. It should be, these are to do with objects. So the first one is the color. So this will be how many items have been colored white. In the first case would be number 3, and so on and so forth. And then the other ones are to do with shapes, cylinders, or a sphere or a cuboid, just to name how many of those there are there. Moving on to the next one, again, count and circle the groups, and in this case we'll be circling those groups in tens, the items in tens. Some of them may need a few to count over, and some of them will just be 10 items. Moving on to question 2, look at the pictures and fill in the numbers. Again, it just wants the total numbers below. So for the apples, there'll be 5 and 1, 5 in the other. So there's 10 altogether. And for the one next to that, there will be 10 at the top. So there's 5 at the bottom. How many more are needed to get you 10? And so there'll be 5 on there as well. Again, plenty of practice on page 10 about counting how many carrots there are in the plate and getting children familiar with the concept of 0 as well, which is very important, and how many balls there are as well, and how many dots there are. Write the numbers in the boxes. So this is again introduction to a number line, which will be later on. So it's in order. So first one will be 0, and then 1, 2, and then the next one will be 3, and so on and so forth. So the child becomes very familiar with counting. And moving on to page 11, this time you're going to be circling the birds and in groups of 7. So it's about counting and being able to count accurately, taking their time and ensuring that the 7. And it may be a good idea to, once they've circled, to just double check within the circle how many they've counted. And if there's any mistakes, it's not an issue, particularly if a child is quite young. It may take them a little while to do this. And I may have mentioned before, children should just spend 30 minutes going through the lesson. So the point of this lesson is not that they're going to go through the entire unit in one go. Just spend 30 minutes at most and then stop. If your child is very keen and wants to do more themselves, then that's not an issue. Be flexible and allow them to do it, but it's got to be enjoyable for them. And if they do more, then at other times they want to do less, then you need to have the flexibility. And ideally, you want to aim at trying to do one lesson a day. On the weekends, maybe a few extra, and then some days they may not do it. So perhaps one day a week they don't do it, or on special occasions. But try to get a regularity. That's the best way to do it, and small and often is the best choice. Moving on to page 12, circle the flowers in groups of 9. So you've got a picture there to go through and to circle 9 there. Question 2, you'll probably have to help your son in terms of reading the items, and it's just showing different ways of getting to 7. So the first one is 4 black and 3 of the other color make 7, and looking at the other options that are available in terms of getting 7. So record some different ways. It doesn't have to be all the ways, so just another 1 or 2 there should be fine. And then moving on to the next topic, as I said, I've taken just the first picture and that's it. And you will, as I say, repeatedly need to get the book to be able to go through the information. And I am a big fan of Real Shanghai Mathematics. I think these particular books are excellent books, and I've tried other ones where I haven't been so impressed. I think they have that right combination of how many questions, which are not too many, and the way they have generally phrased are quite good. And I also like the way they systematically build up the information, so that the child is usually ready to move on to the next stage rather than jumping onto a very difficult topic. Although sometimes, if there is an issue, I will mention it. But moving on to ordinal numbers, again, don't get too fixated with the child needing to remember what ordinal means. That's not important at all. All it's referring to is, as you can see from the question, is referring to first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on and so forth, and just getting them familiar with that. And that's what's mentioned there. And so that's this topic related to that. Question 2, count and write your answers in the bracket. So this is combining what's learned before. So we're going to count how many there are, counting from the left in what position the items are. So getting them familiar with counting and naming things in terms of first, second, third, counting from the left, counting from the right. So they need to be familiar with that. And personally, a good way of knowing left and right is the hand that you shake, usually is the right hand. And that's how I would often suggest to know left and right, or if it's written here, then we start writing from the left in terms of English. That would be another way of knowing that. And then again, just combination of what's been learned. So number 3, count and draw and circle how many birds there are in total, and then again putting a tick underneath the bird and getting children familiar with counting, and in this case first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. Moving on to the next topic, which is let's compare. Okay, that's here. And I mentioned before, you don't need a pupil textbook. This is quite independent from that and generally quite straightforward. So this is the let's compare here. You're getting your child familiar with more and less. On 1A, you just put tick the item that are more, and the way to do it, as they're suggesting, is you can draw a line between the items as they've shown you, and then whichever one's left over obviously will be more. So in this case, the pair will be more, and the case of the girl will be more than the hats. And as I say, they just pair these up. So they're showing you how they are done, and also you can put the numbers in the box as well just by counting, and that would be another way of seeing which one's more, as a bigger number will be more items. See, again, similar to that, by trying to draw the lines together to see which one will be more, and also another way is to count the numbers, and then you will know which one is more. And again, they put a tick next to the item which is more. Write the numbers, this is question 2, in the boxes, then write greater, equal, or less than in the circle. So this is now introducing a concept which is very important, and they bring it very early. So let's see if I can show you something. Okay, so you're introduced to 3 items as such, and these are very important. So let's cover these in a little bit of details. Okay, so this symbol is equal. So the number here and the number here would be the same. This is what's referred to as equal. So if this was, let's get rid of that. So if this was, for example, 8, and this would have to also be 8 because it is equal. Okay, so that's the equal symbol. Then you can also have another symbol which is greater than or less than, and your child needs to get very familiar with this item, so it's important that we cover this in a little bit of detail. So this is shaped like a sideways triangle. The important thing to remember with the shape is we read from left to right, so that's why in this case this will mean greater than, because this open bit here, as you can see, the open bit here, there's a big space between this point and this point, and that's why this is the larger number. So if this is going to be an 8, then this one here will have to be smaller. So any smaller number. And you have options which ones it could be. So if there's a box, you can write whichever one here. Okay, so that's the important thing. If you can see this bit here, the big gap between them, there's no gap here, the lines are touching, and that's why it's the larger number on this side. And because we read from left to right, this would be greater than, and the other symbol, which is the opposite, is this way around. And here on this side will be the larger one, and this side will be the smaller one. So in this case, if I write a number 3, this will have to be larger, so we can put something like 7 here. And because we read from left to right, then this is going to be 3 is less than 7. Okay, 3 is less than 7. That's what we're reading. But more important, I believe, than reading and writing, just be familiar. The open side refers to the larger number, and the point that is closer, they're touching each other, is smaller. And again, in the same concept, that's why equal, if these are straight lines, the gap between them is the same, and that's why the number here, whether this is a 2, would have to be the same 2. Can't be anything else. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. So moving back onto these questions, let's compare. Yeah, let's compare. So and that's referring to number 2 and those symbols there, and it's just getting you familiar with those symbols there in question 3 as well. So from what I've told you, it should be very straightforward. Question 4, draw the shapes to make the sentences true. There are 2 fewer triangles than circles. So you draw the triangles and it'll be 2 fewer, 2 less than circles. So you start drawing it below it, matching them up, and then 2 circles will be left. Why? Because the triangles are less than the circles. For all these kind of questions, your child should just think, okay, 2 fewer triangles. So which one's going to be more, circles or triangles? Well, circles, because there are fewer triangles. And once they know that, then when it says 2 fewer, then it's going to be 2 less. So in this case, there are 6 circles, and 2 fewer than that will be 4 triangles. And try and draw it in a way that you can draw lines similar to the ones here where the shows matching. And then again, B3, there are 3 more triangles. So it's very important that the child reads the questions carefully, and so does not make any mistakes, or if it does make mistakes, can learn from the mistakes, which is often far more important. And see, there are as many circles as squares. So again, getting children familiar with the language of mathematics. So as many, the child may not be familiar with that, but as many means it's the same. So these will be equal. And there are 2 more squares than circles, and the pictures of the circles. So you'll have to draw circles there, and the circles will be 2 less. And then finally, moving on to the last topic within this unit 1, and that is the number line. So this is 5 within there, and this is straightforward in terms of writing the numbers down, the missing numbers. As you can imagine, you're going in order. So in this case, it'll be 3, 4, 5 is done for you, 6, 7 is done, 8, 9, and getting the child to be familiar with that. And again, same thing with the ones below that, although they're also showing you steps of 3, but in this exercise, it's a case of just filling in the missing numbers and making sure your child is familiar with the order that they are in. It's very important they can count correctly and write the numbers in a correct manner, and the same also true for the ones below that as well. And then the one below, compare, write greater than, equal, or less than in each of the empty circles, and they can then just do that straight away. And the number line is just demonstrating that which number is bigger is the one where the animal in this picture is having to make a bigger jump. So it's another way of trying to visualize it. But generally speaking, the child should be familiar with which number is bigger and smaller, and may not even need to refer to the number line. So that ends this first lesson, and we will move on to the next unit, which is unit 2. Hopefully not in the too future distance. Please do leave any comments and subscribe and like the information, and it will be a motivation for me to continue with this work.